The member for South West Coast.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to speak on the Racing Amendment Unauthorised Access Bill 2022. Now, the purpose of this bill is to amend the Racing Act of 1958, and it's a bill that will prohibit unauthorised access to certain areas of racecourses during meeting and official trial meetings, mainly and particularly out in country race meetings, because it already happens in the main racing arenas. So the main area of this legislative change is to set a standard of behaviour at certain locations, such as around the track, mounting yard and stable, so the restricted areas. But it's also to improve safety. So behaviours such as climbing fences adjacent to restricted areas or throwing or kicking projectiles into restricted areas are included in this legislation, as is flying drones over those restricted areas. Now, those things sound like normal things you would never ever do in an arena where there's animals, particularly horses, who get shocked and startled quite easily. But in this day and age, many people don't understand the sensitivities around animals. So unfortunately, we have to put legislation in place to, what seems to me, to get normal common sense. But it's more about the disruptive and deliberate behaviours that this bill is probably really trying to address, and that's really quite upsetting for people like me who have worked with animals all their lives, to think that people will deliberately cause intentional damage or harm to an animal. But when you look back, and in 2010, in my part of the world, a then 56-year-old full-time student from Melbourne ran onto the Warrnambool racecourse only minutes before the Grand Annual steeplechase. He was convicted and fined in the Warrnambool court. That was a deliberate act. He told the Standard he would do it again if it would end jumps racing. That's why this legislation is so important. Protesters believe the cause justifies the means, but it actually just as much endangers themselves or other patrons, officials and the horses. So in recent years, protesters have used drones at Warrnambool Racecourse, and so I'm also really glad to see this as part of the bill. But the bill does not restrict people from protesting outside the race meeting, which happens every year, and I totally endorse the right for people to peacefully protest. That's a democratic right and not something that we should stop. But having a deliberate impact and causing unsafe issues to happen around people or animals just is abhorrent in my mind. So I look at the importance of racing in our region to our families who run businesses like tourism, accommodation businesses, hospitality businesses, for events like our May Race Carnival, which has now been going for, or the Warrnambool Racing Club has been going for 150 years. And this year, on March 18th, I will be celebrating with the Warrnambool Race Club the 150-year anniversary. So congratulations to all the people who have made that over the years a great club, and to get to 150 years is certainly commendable, and I wish them all very well for the celebration events and look forward to taking part in them as well, because Warrnambool is very fortunate to have the May Race Carnival. It contributes an enormous amount to, like I say, the economy, but it's not. The economy is a word that actually means the families who live in that area, who run the businesses, who educate their children. Racing overall contributes $112 million to the southwest economy per annum. Now that's harness racing, which is $19.1 million, greyhound racing $14.5 million, and horse racing, thoroughbred racing, which is $78.6 million. That's just in South West Coast, $112.3 million. That's huge. And it employs 900 people in our region, community members who all work together to bring the racing events to be such a celebration and a time to come together. 637 full-time people in the thoroughbred industry, 148 in harness racing and 114 people in greyhound racing. Huge amount that is contributing to the well-being of our community. So almost 30,000 people attend the three-day May Race Carnival last year in 2022, and every year it seems to get bigger and bigger. And that carnival itself, the three-day carnival, which has the longest race in the Southern Hemisphere, which we're very proud of, generates $15 million into the Warrnambool's economy just over those 3 days, and employs another 250 casual employees to cover that period of the 3 days. So not only do we have the May races, but we've got 20 race meetings in Warrnambool each year, with the Jericho Cup, which has started in the last 5 years, I think it is, and going from strength to strength. Again, well done to the committee who started that, and how well it's going is fantastic because of the enthusiasm we have of people like those committee members. The Lafferty Thackeray Day, Koroit, Port Fairy and Woodford Cups are other very well-known and well-supported race meets. But it's really disappointing that we have to get to this point where people will deliberately cause mayhem and put at the risk to try and prove a point people's lives and animals' lives. I spent a quarter of a century working with animals, and I worked so closely with vets. Every week we would work with vets. We would be up at 4 in the morning making sure our animals were cared for. We would make sure the last thing we did at night was check them before we went to bed. Any sick animals we would be caring for with every tool we had available to us. And animals are smart. They don't do what they don't want to do. And farmers know that, and horse people know that. And it always astounds me that people judge industries that they've not necessarily been part of. And I just encourage people to get involved. If you actually have a problem, get involved and see for yourself, and you can address these problems. And that's what we've seen with the racing industry. They've just got continuous improvement going on constantly. They actually support this bill, as do we, and that's why we have a support position on the bill, because the industry has brought this forward so they can protect their animals and people, of course. But the fact that horses are so well looked after by their trainers, their owners, their stable hands, their carers, those people aren't leaving the industry in droves because they're shocked at what they see and they hate what they do. They love their animals. They have chiropractors for their horses, they have acupuncture for their horses, they have remedial massages going on. It astounds me how much people who work with animals care about them and love them and spend so much. I used to say when we were dairy farming, I spent more on my animals' health than I did on my children's health, and probably because we had Medicare rebates and PBS and the pharmaceutical benefits scheme. But it was true. We never hesitated if our animals needed to see a specialist. That was absolutely done immediately. So it always shocks me when we judge so wrongly that people are, raping and pillaging the landscape and, being cruel to animals. It's a bit like parenting. We all absolutely adore our kids, and 99.9% of people do the right thing. Some parents do terrible things and we're all shocked and it's abhorrent, and we want to make sure that never happens. But you'll never be able to legislate for the lowest common denominator's behaviour. And unfortunately, my message is let's get out there and embrace these industries and not judge without knowledge. I love seeing this piece of legislation go through because we're protecting our animals and protecting our people, but let's stop judging the people who know the industry and listen to those who actually work with industries. Everyone can improve. No one should be cruel to animals. Anyone who is should absolutely feel the full brunt of the law. But I embrace this legislation. I'm very supportive, as is the industry, of this bill, and I look forward to seeing it enacted in legislation.